Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Jack and Joe Show. Whether you are watching or listening, welcome. I hope you're well. I am Joe Sansom, and I'm joined once again by Jack Kelly. How you doing?
Yeah, very well. We are almost at the time for Portugal.
Wow. Yeah, I hear you're going shopping. I hear you're preparing yourself to sun it up in Portugal. Are you going to be wearing the Fulham kit? No, because it hasn't been released yet. That's a shame.
I might take a couple of shirts out there with me, but it's mainly to buy those sort of little shower gels and deodorants so that you can fit it on a plane in terms of under 100 millilitres.
It would be a good time for Fulham to release the going away shirt, wouldn't it? The one that they referenced. I think it all went to pot when they realised they'd spelt Jimenez's name wrong on the newspaper, which was quite amusing. We're back. We were going to film last week, Jack, and then the issue that we had was that absolutely nothing had happened since we last spoke. It would have literally been a repeat performance from both of us. The last time we spoke, we both moaned. It's fair to say that I'll probably have another moan today. I'm going to be honest with you. If that's not your sort of thing, I do apologise. I will give my reasoning for it. We haven't signed anyone. We haven't sold anyone. We haven't released our new kit. We have released some more friendly news. We know that it's confirmed. This won't be news to anyone here, but since we last spoke, that we'll be playing Nottingham Forest, confirmed in Portugal. There's a few other friendly rumours doing the rounds, Saudi Arabian side, Victoria, but none of them are really confirmed. We did have a behind closed doors friendly the other afternoon as well against Aberdeen, which the club tweeted we won 4-1, which is great to see. There was actually a little bit more detail on Aberdeen's website for anyone that's interested, just in terms of when the goals were. Spoiler alert, we went 1-0 down 2 minutes in, then got a Wilson brace, Muniz and King scored. So good start to pre-season. I would hope, without knowing anything, that we've got some more behind closed doors friendlies coming up, just based on the fact that we've only got three official matches, is it, diarised at this point. So I really hope that we've got enough time ahead of that Brighton game. There is a little bit of transfer news to talk about today, Jack, which does excite me. Reiss Nelson is the first one that I'd like to speak about, and that broke sort of last Wednesday afternoon. Sammy Mockbell, who's a very reliable journalist, now works for the BBC, previously at the Mail, and very good in terms of Arsenal stories. I think he's got some good connections there. And he basically said Fulham are exploring a deal for Reiss Nelson once again. Seems to be a loan deal, but probably with a sort of permanent option or obligation included. But the structure of the deal was being worked out. And I think we spoke, didn't we, Jack, on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, and we were both saying this should be done really quickly. You know, let's get him in the team for the Portugal trip next week. Loads of time. You know, he could be in the kit launch. I'm sure we'll get a here we go or confirmation from a David Ornstein tier source. And then we saw him quite moodily pictured on a plane to Singapore. So what's going on there? What's your opinion of this?
Yeah, the intel I have is not the best at the moment. In terms of where I think Reiss's head is at, I think he's probably incredibly frustrated that he's going to the pre-season tour with a team that realistically he doesn't think he's going to feature for this season, and has had no real intention or indication from Arteta that he's going to feature for them this season, given that basically the whole summer he's been linked with predominantly three clubs in Bournemouth, Palace and Fulham. What I will predict will happen is that, you know, they arrived in Singapore, I think yesterday or day before. He'll be there for a few more days, and then I think we're going to get some sort of it's on and he flies back. You're right, you know, if this was sorted by the weekend, he would have stayed behind. Look, there's been whispers about, you know, whether he was meant to stay behind or never meant to stay behind. I think it was basically Arsenal's position to be like, let's get this done and frustrate Fulham by saying, yeah, he's going to come with us. Therefore, it's your prerogative to negotiate with us to the terms that we want, i.e. an option or an obligation that suits Arsenal. I know Arsenal and Fulham have a decent relationship when it comes to transfers, but I think because this will probably end up being a sale at the end of it, because Nelson's had loan after loan now, well, not necessarily loan after loan, sorry, more like a mixed seasons after mixed seasons, where essentially, not to be cutthroat, but I think Arsenal will just want to get him off the books. So I think that The reason it's taking so long, in my personal opinion, without any intel, is the fact that Arsenal want a fixed fee for him at the end of this loan, at the end of the 25-26 season. And then I think that in itself is what they're going to be most satisfied with, like a transfer fee that they're going to be happy with. And I think Fulham at the moment are probably haggling because they don't want to pay as much as Arsenal want. And then the contract's always difficult, certain appearances and triggers certain clauses in the contract, blah, blah, blah. It's actually quite a complex deal, albeit I think it could have been sorted before they went into Asia, but obviously has not. Do I think it's going to be our first signing this summer? If you'd asked me this time last week, I would have said yes. If you ask me now, I think no. Do I think it's going to happen? Yes. But it's going to take its sweet time. We travel to Portugal on Friday, I believe, as in the club do. I don't go out there till the Monday. There's a game on the Saturday. Lots of Fulham fans are going out there for that as well. Will we see Reiss Nelson play against Nottingham Forest? Probably not. Will we see Reiss Nelson travel to Portugal to complete his move to Fulham? Possibly. And that's just a prediction on my end. Joe, I think we have to touch on Josh King before we move on. In fact, we can do it in both Josh and Seth Ridgeon. This is probably, I said it before on my own Patreon channel, that I think this Josh King contract extension is the best news I've heard at the club since we were promoted under Marco Silva. Just in terms of how big that could be and how important it was that basically I think he's the best young talent we've had at the club, probably better than Fabio Carvalho in my personal opinion, for a long, long, long time. And to time down to 4 more years is sensational, with the addition of Ridgeon basically going to Carrington and Manchester United, looking around and saying, I don't want this. It's like a graveyard. I'm going to Fulham. And it hasn't been announced yet, but I believe it's coming this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, what problem that we've had in recent years is hanging on to our talent. And the Ridgeon one would have been frustrating, but I think other people mentioned it in various platforms that I don't know really what we could have done apart from offer him a deal at the age he's at. So it's almost even more of a positive that he seems to have picked us over some of the massive interest elsewhere. You mentioned Man United and Carrington, but Liverpool have also been reportedly interested in him. So have Chelsea. These are teams that have absolutely huge resources and probably fantastic in terms of development for these players, maybe in a different way, where they maybe wouldn't be a pathway into their first team, but the networks of clubs they're all connected to, it can really suit a young player. This would be huge news. The Josh King one is also fantastic. I mean, the thing about the Josh King one is it's more an immediate first team bit of news, because he started to have a bit more involvement towards the final few games of last season, looked really bright, and I would hope that he'll be heavily involved this coming season. I don't think he'll be, don't think when we start the season he'll be in the starting 11. Wouldn't say that by the end of it he won't be, but I definitely think he'll be on the bench and coming off and getting involvement and starting in the cup games, which could start from mid to the end of August. So really good bit of news on both accounts, something that we've really struggled with and been burned with in the past. And the Diffuser news a couple of weeks ago is the same in terms of, if we are to lose our coveted youngsters, we should be at a bare minimum losing them for a fee that is fair. And that's what the issue has been. There's plenty of clubs that are slightly lower down the natural food chain in terms of who has the most investment, who has the most historically acclaimed finishes. We can't pretend that Man United, as of right this second, is a more enticing prospect than Fulham, but historically they are, let's face it. We are ensuring that our future is slightly brighter from a financial point of view. We could have been in a position where we lost Tete for free, we lost Kearney for free, we lost Diffuser for free, we lost King for free, and we lost Ridgeon on before the scholarship deal was signed. That's a huge loss investment-wise, even regardless of their footballing ability and what they'll provide to us. And you have to think that football is, as much as I don't like to say it, is a business, right? And these decisions are things that we've struggled with in the past. We've struggled to tie down players and we've paid the price for it. The fact that we lost Carvalho and got that measly sum through the tribunal, the same with Harvey Elliott. Dembele went for next to nothing. We've had loads of examples, Matt O'Reilly. It's so frustrating, and I'm glad that at least with these players, it's not happening again. Because at the start of the summer, if you remember, when the Callum Osmond news broke, it was very much, here we go again.
Yeah.
And everyone was thinking this is going to be the same with all these players. There's a reason they're going. I'm very happy it's not happening with these. And look, I've complained my fair bit about the club this summer. I think that the Josh King news was, firstly, very well kept under wraps. Nice surprise. Secondly, just wonderful news, the sort of morale-raising news. I mean, the others were frustrating me a bit more, like Tete and TC, because I thought they were dragging on way too long. I don't know the ins and outs of the negotiations, but I thought it should have been sorted. That's my perspective as someone that's not involved in negotiations. For one like King, I did think it would rattle on for a bit. I didn't think he would necessarily sign this summer, so I was delighted with it. And it was the first nice surprise we've had from Fulham in quite some time.
I know we haven't been busy in terms of incomings this summer, even outgoings as well. Nothing seems to be on the horizon from what I'm hearing, but the individual bits of business we have done this summer have been outstanding. And for a lot of people who I've seen, I've read all the comments on various podcasts that we've done over the summer, Joe, and reading fan opinion on X and certain everywhere basically where you can find Fulham opinion. It's been incredibly negative, incredibly frustrated, and understandably so. We still haven't made a signing. We're the only Premier League team not to do it. We cannot stand still. I say every single time I come on some sort of podcast, and right now Marco Silva's plea of we cannot stand still hasn't come to any fruition, because right now we are standing still on paper. But the individual bits of business, and I'm tying in, Ridgeon, hopefully when it's announced, Defugarols, King, Tete, TC, in terms of 1 more year for TC, morale boost for the fan base, 3 more years of Tete with an option, 4 years of King, 4 years of Defugarol, and whatever happens with Ridgeon. That is outstanding business in terms of longevity for 29-year-olds going on 30, for a 1 more year with TC, and for the youngsters coming through. That's brilliant. It makes me believe that I have faith in the board. And let's not, last summer, our transfer window was, albeit late, but very, very good, in my personal opinion. And the only reason why I think I said it last week with what was going on last summer, and everything to distract us last summer with the men's Euros, obviously the women's Euros going on this summer as well, which I very much enjoyed watching. Can't wait for the semi-final tomorrow. What was my point? Is that the reason why I found myself getting more frustrated this summer was because of what's been said by Marco Silva leading up to the summer. And, we've been planning since January. We can't stand still. We need to know the board know what we need to do. And so far, nothing's been done in terms of incomings to improve the squad. That's why I find myself a little bit frustrated. The fans feel themselves frustrated because they've seen those quotes. They've seen they've been reposted by yourself, by Dan Powell, by a lot of Fulham fans, going back to those individual quotes that a lot of fans put a lot of weight on, because that's what's going to get them through the summer. That's what's going to get them excited. And so far, that initial excitement, which I definitely felt coming out of a press conference in April and May, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be such a great summer. And so far, we're sat on July 21st without signing.
Yeah.
That's the frustration on my part. But going back to my original point, the individual bits of business we have done have been outstanding. And I like the fact that my job's hard. I like the fact that I can't get the scoops. I like that. I've got a couple, but I'd rather the club would be much of a closed book than an open book where anyone could find out anything, because it's well layered at Fulham, where genuinely it's very, very hard to find out things, and I think that's very, very good. And I very much enjoy the hard elements of that job and of the job that's been this summer. And once the window's closed, obviously we'll just get on with the season. But for now, it's been frustrating. But I think better things will come soon.
I really hope so, because there's been no things.
Things.
So a couple of my thoughts on the transfer window. A lot of people compare it to previous summers, myself included, in terms of when we've done business, what our model is. We all know that we do business late. That's no secret. What grates me is fans saying that there's a very clear reason that we do business late, and that would be very fair to me if I thought it was true. So let's look at last summer. So, for example, Emile Smith-Rowe, we didn't get that done until the first week of August. It was very, very clear from the start of the summer that Emile Smith-Rowe was no longer in Arsenal's plans. There was no role for him in that squad. I think Arteta had even said such. We spent quite a long time agreeing a deal. It went all the way into August, and we got it done so late that we may have saved a few £1 million, don't get me wrong, but it meant Emile Smith-Rowe did not have a full pre-season with Fulham. He was not able to complete 90 minutes the whole season. And I do firmly believe that if he'd been with us for a couple of extra weeks, that would have been a massive benefit. Imagine if he'd had an extra month with Marco Silva bedding into that team. Mm-hmm. Imagine if he hadn't looked like he was playing with us for the first time against Manchester United on opening day, where he looked really unfit. Let's face it. Sander Berge was not training with Burnley for the entire summer last year. We submitted one bid and it was accepted. It was our first bid. No one else submitted a bid for him last summer. We did not save any money. Their valuation was 20 million. We spent 20 million. We got him in after the Man United game. He wasn't able to play, apart from Birmingham in the cup game, any first team appearances until we went to City at the start of October. Obviously, a few off the bench here and there. What I'm trying to put across here is that, yes, we might have saved some money. In some aspects, I actually don't think we have, for example, Berge, but that might be a one-off, I appreciate.
Yeah.
We probably did with Smith-Rowe. That being said, we have cost ourselves money from where we could have finished in the league by getting 3 extra points by having a new defensive midfielder that would have been in for the first game of the season. You know, we had to bring Tom Cairney off the bench in that game against Man United, and he got turned really easily. If we'd have had Sander Berge starting, maybe we'd have brought Lukic off the bench. And then I think that he wouldn't be getting turned so easily. Maybe we draw 0-0. We get an extra point. This is the domino effect I'm trying to explain. I understand it's not as cut and dry as this, but from my perspective, as much money you can save by waiting later in the window, you can also lose based on the results that happen before your main targets come in. A couple of caveats here. I do appreciate that we're quite ambitious often with who we want to target, and that some of these players aren't available until later because maybe that team needs to replace them, or maybe they just don't want to let them go. But you encouraged me to tweet this the other day, Jack, when we were joking about Reiss Nelson. You know, our last 3 transfers, going back 11 months, Reiss Nelson on loan to replace Willian, who left. Willian to replace Nelson, who was injured, for free. And now Nelson on loan to replace Willian, who left again. There's £0 spent there, by the way, at all. £0. You cannot tell me we're being ambitious. The January transfer window is going under the radar as a travesty. We were nearly in Europe at that point. Regardless of what happened in a cup, forget about 8th. 7th was in reach, 6th was in reach. We might not have got there. I'm looking at teams like Aston Villa, and I'm not saying we should have brought in Marcus Rashford or Asensio. Yeah. I know that might be a bit too ambitious for the fact they had Champions League football, but I think we could have aimed a bit higher than Willian on loan for the 50th time. Free, sorry. It just didn't make sense to me. And yes, we did try a couple of ambitious moves late in the window. You know, Chukwueze from AC Milan, someone we're apparently interested in again. Again, why are we interested now? Why are we interested 7 months on from when we nearly agreed a deal? If you wanted to buy him then, I've refused to believe that something so drastic has happened in that time that we now don't want him anymore. There's just so many things that confuse me about the way we do business. And there might be something that I'm not seeing. There might be other targets that aren't in the media, like you say, being kept under wraps, that are more ambitious and we're trying to get them first. I understand. But the ultimate fact is right now, when we go to Brighton on opening day, and I appreciate there's time left, and we will probably sign players before then, we are going with the exact same squad that we had last season, even if we sign Reiss Nelson, with the only difference being we've actually lost Willian and we've lost Vinicius. And don't get me wrong, I don't think either of them would be pulling up any trees down on the south coast, but our squad has actually diminished by 3 players right now. And I know there are young players that can step up. I know there's players that can be more involved. I understand that. I feel like that's where we're going to go.
That was where I was going to go.
It's not enough for what we want to do next. I want them to be more involved, but they're not replacing these players. Moan over, because we are apparently going to make a signing, Jack. It's a second choice goalkeeper. I want to caveat that now. It's not one that's going to grab all the headlines. It's not the most exciting, but it's a position that we both agreed we needed to fill. And we are apparently filling it with, excuse my terrible pronunciation, Benjamin Lecomte from Montpellier, who has been a keeper that's been around the blocks. He's been reasonably successful in his career as a quite solid guy between the sticks. Montpellier had a terrible season last year, obviously went down. Don't think you can attribute that just to him, but obviously he hasn't had the best season. And apparently we've agreed or close to agreeing a deal of around 500 grand, which in today's market is not much. What are your thoughts on this? I know obviously there was a story earlier in the window when we were looking at a couple of free agent goalkeepers. You mentioned Matt Ryan as someone that we were potentially in discussions with. It seemed like we wanted to fill this with someone relatively cheap that is an upgrade on Steven Bender based on some of the shaky performances we saw from him in the cup games. You feel like this fits the bill?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah,
like Matt Ryan would have made sense, but I think he needs or wanted more time to figure out his next move. I know Copenhagen were linked and he's already played there, so it would make sense for him to go back.
Especially a World Cup year, I suppose, when he's not going to probably start over Bernd Leno.
And that's exactly probably why the Matt Ryan rumour, albeit was fun to break, but has fallen flat on its face because he's probably gone, well, yeah, I need to be playing to be in that Australia limelight or Australian team, national team limelight. Benjamin Lecomte, I can't say I've ever seen him play, but look, it's a keeper who has European football pedigree in terms of playing in for Atletico Madrid. I think he might have been the understudy to Jan Oblak, which is pretty cool. And look, I just think that I can't. Bender obviously joined whilst I think injured. Then he came in. I watched him in pre-season against Benfica, and he was for 45 minutes just didn't impress me. And then we went to Birmingham, Wigan, other teams we played in the cups, and again just completely not moved by him whatsoever. The Wigan one was definitely quite worrying. Whether we move on Bender or he just becomes the third choice, or we bring through Borto, who gets the third choice, whether we loan out Borto, who knows? It does seem, because from what I've seen and heard and read and whatever, again, it points to the fact that Fulham are going to have two senior keepers in their squad, maybe with an option of a third, like Borto coming through, who obviously could be subject to a loan as well, because it's getting to that stage in his career. Whereas every other Premier League club has three, to the point where you see Marcus Bettinelli as the third choice for keeper for City, whoever happens to their keepers, because obviously rumours are going around about their keepers right now. But it does seem strange that just imagine Leno gets injured, Lecomte gets injured, Bender's no longer here. Let's just say, who are we playing in goal? It's going to have to be Alfie McNally. It's going to have to be Borto. If they're even here as well. I would like to think that we have three senior experienced keepers, but I know it's not nice, the best role in football is to be the third choice goalkeeper at a Premier League club. Yeah, I get that argument and I like that joke and whatever, it's funny, but I can understand coming into a club and basically being told you're the third choice. So even if we're playing in the Carabao Cup against League One, League Two opposition, likelihood is you'll make the bench, because Leno's just going to have a break and have a rest. So I can understand why it's not a tantalising prospect. However, every single other Premier League team seems to manage to get three seniors. So I don't know. Maybe it's just a tactic from us. It runs a bit of a risk. I'm going to touch wood, because obviously Leno's injury record has been phenomenal since he's come to the club. And yeah, look, for a cheap fee, 34 years old, everyone was like, oh, that's so old. What about the average age of the squad? It's a keeper. Fabianski played till he was 40 last season, and he was top class. So, he was okay. He was good enough for the Premier League. So yeah, I'm okay with this. Do I think it's going to be our first signing? On paper, it looks like it could be that way, unless something drastic happens in the next few days. It's a low risk sort of transfer that I'm sure will be an upgrade on Bender, and I think that's what it's all about. And yeah, just going back to your point about what you said before, it does worry me because not only, you talk about Berger not being ready, and when he was ready, he was severely off the pace against Aston Villa. I think he played against City as well, and obviously we lost that game. But the Villa game really stood out to me to the point where I asked Marco the next week when we went up towards Everton, and I was like, given what Berger had to go through with that pressing team from Aston Villa, the way they pressed him and the way that we really struggled in that area of the pitch, does that make you nervous going to Goodison Park, where as the home team, Everton might try and do the same, and suddenly Berger's going to be under the spotlight again, rabbit in the headlights? And he said, I have confidence. And I think Berger may have started that game and actually played very, very well.
He did well. Yeah.
So, and my point being is the fixtures to start this season are harder than we had last season. Brighton away, Man United at home, Chelsea away, who've just won another trophy. I shouldn't be glazing. What am I talking about? And then obviously we go and host Leeds. I can't remember the fixtures now.
Leeds and Brentford.
Hard fixtures, I think. And if we don't have signings ready and match fit, if it's another slow start, again, that's going to be a huge point of frustration for the fan base and for Marco Silva. And in a season where the whole narrative of the whole season at some point is going to be like, well, it's your last year of your contract. You said you see out the contract. Are you going to sign a new contract? The questions are going to come week in, week out. There's no evidence. There's no proof. There's no reason as to why Silva would sign long term at this current stage. And is that our own fault? I don't know. But is that something that he will reference, i.e. the transfer moves, the slowness of the window? Will he reference that in when he speaks to the media all season? I would imagine he might. I imagine he has the capability to do that. And that's what concerns me a lot. This is the best manager we've had at the club since Roy Hodgson, for sure. And he's in the last year of his contract, and we're giving no indication about long-term and sort of high investment into the squad to make him feel like he can take this squad further forward. Like we say, we try and battling for Europe. And if we just lose Marco and just go, well, my contract's up, you've not given me the ambition. We finished, I don't want to be like negative, but we finished like 11th or 12th in the Premier League. I think I've taken you as far as I can go, therefore I'm not going to sign a new contract. Or are we going to invest heavily in the final few weeks of the window and be like, give him a reason to be like, oh my word, okay, we actually can and we will push for Europe. And if we do it, I'm signing on that dotted line halfway through the season because I know we're going to do it.
Agree.
And that's
one
frustrating.
Of these things. Let's say we make 3 big transfers this summer based on the positions that we need / are rumoured to want. A midfielder and 2 wingers, for example. Mm-hmm. Let's say on each of those players, we signed them tomorrow and they were all about 10 million more expensive than they would be if we signed them on deadline day. Just for the sake of this, round number, 30 million between them. We've spent 30 million more than we would have done if we'd waited. We would then get those players in 3 more games. Those players could make the difference. If we continue to do this and we continue to spend earlier, we might get results earlier in the season. The team gels. More players want to join us because we had a good start to the season. We can aim higher. We finish higher. We get more prize money. We go through in the cups. We recoup in shirt sales because fans want to buy these exciting players' shirts. All these things factor in to, one, Marco Silva staying at the club as an ambitious guy that he is, because we've been lucky so far in terms of the fact that he hasn't jumped ship to Saudi. We got lucky, I think, with the Tottenham job in terms of them going for Thomas Frank rather than Marco Silva, because my belief is that Marco Silva would have gone. Ambitious guy, team in the Champions League, I think he'd have gone there. I'll be completely honest with you. As much as I think he absolutely loves Fulham, I could understand if he did go there, as much as it pains me to say it. So we can only get lucky so many times, and he continuously, publicly complains about the way we do business. And I would say that it's more important that we keep Marco Silva than it is that we save a bit of money. And I know that I'm not an accountant. I know that I'm not there seeing the figures and understanding what's at risk. I get that. There is definitely a middle ground here, and we're not finding it consistently. We're getting to the week now where last season all the news broke about Smith Rowe and Ryan Sessegnon and then Cuenca. So things started ramping up just before we went on the Portugal tour last year for the Algarve Cup. So let's see if we do that again this season. It seems like we might do. We've had a few rumours, nothing too much to speak about, obviously, other than the goalkeeper that we've mentioned and Reiss Nelson. Would I be disappointed if that's all we'd done, those 2 signings ahead of this? Yeah, absolutely. I think Silva would as well. And people might say to me, Joe, you're being too negative. We've had 3 good finishes to the season. I completely agree with all that. I'm saying we could have done better. And I'm saying we could have done better by doing business earlier, because if we'd have had the starting 11 we wanted this time last season, the year before, we'd had it in place for the home game against Everton, the game against Brentford, the game at Arsenal, and then Man City, where we had no midfielders, by the way. There's so many times we could have done better. And I strongly believe that better squad depth comes with time to gel, comes with competition built in pre-season, by everyone knowing their jobs game one, not by game four. And yes, it's only 3 games. I don't want to throw away 3 games. If we got to the end of the season, we had 3 games of the season left, and I said to you, oh, we're going to bring in 2 new wingers and a striker, you'd be like, oh, amazing. Wonderful. Yeah, let's get over the line with those. I'm sure we'll do better. We would. It's one of these things. It just doesn't make sense to me. And yes, I'm not an accountant, like I've said about 3 times already. I understand there's a business side of football. I understand that we're trying to toe the line, but I just think we could aim higher. And I would love to see us do it this summer, but I think it might be cutting it a bit fine for that.
The 25-26 season is shaping up to be a big one for Fulham, and one thing you need ahead of it is NordVPN, the fastest VPN on the planet that allows you to watch football matches from wherever you are in the world, on either your phone, your tablet, or your laptop. For instance, you could use NordVPN to watch Premier League matches for a fraction of the price, including those 3 p.m. kickoffs that aren't available in this country. Or if you go on holiday this summer, you can use NordVPN to access your UK TV subscriptions. And right now, you can use NordVPN on up to 10 devices, which means you can share the amazing benefits that NordVPN has with your family or your friends. And you can get a great deal when you sign up to NordVPN at nordvpn.com/Fulhamish. Not only will you get a huge discount, but you'll also get 4 months extra as well. And it's entirely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So to get that special discount plus 4 free months, go to nordvpn.com/Fulhamish. That's nordvpn.com/Fulhamish.
I'm going to spin it in a positive sense and say that we have a really good squad right now. We have a very good squad. And you think about it, they've all been back in pre-season. I've seen Defugaro's back in pre-season, and Raul Jimenez apparently was on the bench for the friendly against Aberdeen, according to what Aberdeen put out, which means that these players who could have taken more time off have not taken more time off. And we're talking about a 35-year-old in Raul Jimenez, who could have used a break because he needed it, because he's an older player, because he maybe gets more fatigued than your younger footballers. And we've got, like I say, and my stocks are going into players who I think are going to improve for next season, therefore improve the team. They're not new signings. I'm not saying they are like new signings, but they can improve to improve the team. And that is the likes of Emile Smith-Rowe, who I think, just based off one image I've seen, which was pre-season, just looks better. And then, of course, I've seen him subsequently in pictures in pre-season where he looks much more leaner and much better. I think he's going to be much better. Robinson's a fair way off, I think, a little bit, which is fine. Yeah. It's not fine, but I think Essenga is obviously exciting. Someone to get excited about if we see him at pre-season in Portugal. Sessegnon can obviously play there as well. That's another player. I think Sessegnon's going to get better as well. I think Wilson is finding the peak of his career right now. I think Berger, better. Yep. Lukic has got better. Muniz, this is his season to absolutely go for it. I think Iwobi will start very well again. Like, all these players have worked very, very hard before they've come to pre-season. They've enjoyed their holidays. They've worked hard. And they're back in pre-season right now, and I'm sure they're looking pretty good. You know, a 4-1 win over Aberdeen is not going to start making me think we're going to get into the Champions League or anything like that. But and one player I haven't even mentioned, who is probably the reason I was going to make this point, Josh King, who is going to get better and better and better. Now he's got that 4-year deal behind him, knowing he's going to be in and around the first team. The confidence he gave off in that interview, the swagger he gave off in that interview, the maturity he gave off in that interview. I was like, we are so lucky right now. So I know it's frustrating. Upgrading the squad always should be the priority of the summer. But just based on, like, it wouldn't surprise me if we went to the Amex and won. It wouldn't surprise me right now if we hosted Man United and won. It wouldn't surprise me if we went to a Chelsea side who have just played an enormously long tournament in sweltering conditions. We go to them, third game of the season, they're still sort of playing catch up, and we won. I'm not saying we're going to get 9 points from 3 games, but it is a possibility. It is a possibility, and I think that is just down to the manager we have in Marco Silva, who's a fantastic, fantastic manager, and the squad of players we've got. Calvin Bassey, Anthony Robinson when he's back to full pelt, Kenny Tete, Yalki Madison, I think is going to have a better season. It's all well and good. It's so easy for me to say this. It's easy for me to just glaze these players and say, I think we're going to have a better season. Obviously, the evidence is on the pitch. But you have to look at it at face value, which is a squad that arguably should have finished in the top 10 last season, should have finished in European places, in my opinion, last season. So if we can maintain that whilst improving individual players and their performances getting better, there's no reason why we can't have another good season, albeit we have to make signings to improve because then we can go even further.
That's the thing. It's about going further because I agree with you. We've got a good team. That team rocks up to Brighton tomorrow. I back them 100%. The problem that we've got is I think people are forgetting how frustrating we did get to watch in the latter half of last season in terms of so many chances not scoring and also leaking too many goals. And we have the same team right now. And my worry is that I don't want to fall back into those old habits and we go to Brighton and just for the sake of this, putting my negative hat on, hasn't really come off today, I appreciate, but putting it on, we lose. Let's say we lose to a very good Brighton team. Caveat, would not be the end of the world. Very, very good team. Lost their last season.
Yeah.
And we had a few chances. We just looked a bit toothless. And then we're in the same position where we're going, we could really do with another left winger and right winger and striker off the bench. We also need a midfielder that can score. That's my worry. I don't want to be going into those games and calling out things that we knew we needed back in March when we lost to Crystal Palace in the FA Cup. These are things where we've known we needed them since then. And there has to be the right profiles available. I appreciate that. We've been linked to some exciting young strikers, some good wingers. Seems like Nelson is the most advanced. I just want to make sure we're giving ourselves the best possible chance we have to have another special season. And that only happens to our best ability if the squad is ready from game week 1. I'm not expecting our whole squad to be done by then. I want to caveat that now. If we went there with one new player that was in the starting 11 that's a needle mover, happy days. I'm happy with that. I just want there to be year-on-year improvement from that opening game because I felt like that's where we've left ourselves short in all seasons other than the 22-23 season when we played Liverpool and we had Polinia and Pereira in that starting 11. We had Leno and Babu and Solomon on the bench ready to come on. We had Duffy ready to come on. We had the new players ready. Even if they weren't there from the start, we had better depth on the bench. And I don't want to get into a precarious position where those first few weeks we're going, wish we'd done business a bit earlier. And I hope that the club makes some moves between now and then. I'm not bothered if they're there before that Forest game. It'll annoy me a little bit, but it's not that deep. I want them there before that friendly, before we play Brighton, at the Cottage, Frankfurt. Let's see what happens then. And I'll put my positive hat back on. We've got time before then. We have got time. The new season does not start tomorrow, but I just really, really hope the club are realising that a positive start, it's indescribable how important that is. It raises everyone's expectations, morale, the atmosphere in the ground, new players joining, and also makes players that we already have better, like you say. Wouldn't it be great for Josh King to be in a winning environment early on and learning from a midfielder that maybe is a little bit better at goal scoring? It'd be wonderful for that. All these things, I do think there is a domino effect, and it's not as cut and dry as we sign more players now, we win at Brighton. I know that's not how it works.
Yeah.
But I do think we'd have a better chance. Absolutely. And that's what I hope happens.
All right, 2 questions before we go. I know we've gone on longer than we thought, but actually it's been a very fun discussion and actually quite cathartic on my point of view for sure. How many signings do you think we'll make before Brighton away?
Before Brighton away, I will say 3. One of them being the goalkeeper that seems to be all but done. I am banking on Reiss Nelson joining in that time. And based on rumours we've heard so far, a third striker that can be on the bench for that game. I don't know if that'll be Romulo or someone else, I'm not sure. But I would say 3 signings by then. What about you?
I'm going to say 4 with just a complete out of nowhere.
Would love it. I mean, it happened last season. We've said it so many times. It just happens. We didn't know who this keeper was this time yesterday, for example. And now he's apparently going to be our first signing.
We could sign an absolute world beater, and we would know about it only because it's got a "here we go" or an Ornstein "it's happening" tweet.
Yeah.
No links. There was no Yauki Madison links. No Sander. Well, I think there was no Sanderberger links. Tiny. No Cuenca links. You've said it 3 weeks ago, when we did a podcast, and it's obviously stayed in my brain since then. Final question: how many players, disregarding Tete and players who have signed new contracts, TC, etc., how many players do you think Marco Silva's called up this summer, convincing them to join Fulham?
Oh my goodness! I mean, like you say, the Tete thing is a big deal because we'd basically lost him by that point. Yeah. And the Fabrizio tweet, if you believe it, I believe it's probably agent-led, but it probably has some truth to it in terms of Silva's called him up and basically sealed the deal. And every time we seem to sign players, they always call back to Marco Silva, saying that he was integral. I would say he's been on the phone with double figures players this summer, speaking to them about the project. It doesn't mean that they're all advanced. I imagine the way that football seems to work now is that often personal terms of the players are agreed first, and you're basically checking if they would be interested before a bid is sent, because why would you waste your time if the player then turns around and goes, actually, I don't really fancy joining, and you've wasted weeks of negotiations with that club. If he was speaking to, let's say, Reiss Nelson and saying, would you be open to coming back? Is he speaking to Romulo before we make that bid and saying, are you open to coming to the Premier League? Has he spoken to this keeper?
Some reports have said he wants to go to the Premier League.
Yeah, there you go. There's the reports. And, I always take the Turkish reports with a pinch of salt because they linked us to Brighton Say Samuel 500 million times. That being said, sometimes they're obviously going to be right. The same way that sometimes the English press is wrong. And it's one of these things where I think definitely double figures players, to answer your question. And I think he's so integral to how we recruit players.
Sorry, I'm being a journalist right now and going one final question.
Yeah.
Dream realistic signing.
Dream realistic signing.
One
It's a question I like. I'll give you a couple for different positions.
Okay.
And this is off the top of my head. I haven't prepared for this. So if you've got someone better in the comments, let us know. I'm sure there is that I'm just not thinking of. I would love a player like, in the profile of, Douglas Luiz in midfield. Okay. And the reason that I like is it's a midfielder that actually has goal scoring repertoire in the Premier League. And in terms of towards the front line, really like Harvey Barnes. And the reason I say Harvey Barnes is, we've mentioned it before, we've discussed him. It's Newcastle recruiting players for their front line, like Alanga. He's going to have less game time. Harvey Barnes is a player that, yes, he's injury prone. It's not ideal, but he's a clinical finisher. We've seen that firsthand against us. Player I really like. There's probably others that I'm thinking of as well. I can't come to mind right now. Those would be mine. What about yours, if there's any difference?
I've gone with one that's just going to, because we have been linked with him this summer. He's a player who's formerly played for Fulham. I have to say it's going to be João Palhinha for me.
Look, absolute needle mover.
Yeah.
No doubt. Yeah.
And I've seen there's been links with Spurs in the last few days, and for him to go and play under Thomas Frank would definitely make, I think, Brentford fans quite chuffed, and something to give back at us, but would make me quite frustrated. If you've actually got the two options of Thomas Frank, Champions League football, Tottenham, Marco Silva, been there at Fulham, fans love you, it's actually very difficult to actually, for me, I'd actually feel like he would want to play the Champions League football because of the World Cup.
Yeah.
Champions League puts you in a bigger shop window, whereas Fulham, you'll be in the Premier League making loads of fun tackles and everyone making compilations and blah, blah, blah. But it's just that level up. It's just the fact that Thomas Frank's the manager would actually just make that quite painful. Right, we've definitely gone on for longer than I thought, but Joe, it's actually been fantastic and I actually feel a whole lot better. Thank you so much for watching. Joe, thank you so much for being here. Next time we speak, I'll be in Portugal and your head will be where?
My head will probably be somewhere in a distant galaxy for probably even something unrelated to Fulham. But I agree, Jack. It's been a bit good cop, bad cop today. You've definitely been Mr. Positive. I've been more negative. I admit that. I understand that. I understand many people will disagree with me. And absolutely fine. We want to know what your thoughts are. We've made a pledge that we want to involve more of our comment section this year. So if you've got any thoughts, you've got any questions, your opinions on which players you'd like to sign, your opinion on our strategy, it's very much a divide in the fan base and there is no right answer. everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I've been debating a few people on Twitter, but ultimately I feel nothing but respect for anyone I debate with. It's my opinion versus yours. And like, what do you think versus me? Neither of us are in the recruitment team. It's not my job. It's not your job. It's just a bit of fun. And ultimately, Fulham will sign players. Who would you like them to be? Let's see.
Exactly. Let's get a conversation going down in the comments. I know that in the last video, there was a couple of comments that we didn't necessarily enjoy or like. And like I say, everyone's entitled to their opinion. Maybe it was quite a moany podcast from both of our sides, but to throw accusations at myself or Joe about our attitude towards all aspects of football, including whatever sort of team is playing, I think it's incredibly unfair. And I think that person should take a look in the mirror, because I think that was completely out of line, because you don't know me as a person. You don't know Joe as a person. You see us for 40 minutes every couple of weeks on a show. So please reserve judgment before meeting us. I think that's very, very important. For everyone else who's listening, that was just one comment. Everyone else who have given us fantastic comments over the summer and feedback from the podcast and on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for watching, for listening. We'll be back next week. Will we have a signing by then? I think maybe.
Surely,
Thank you so much for watching, and please come on, Fulham.